Hi, I'm Tony, and welcome to my channel, Watch Time LA. Hello folks, and welcome to another episode of Watch Time LA. Today we're going to be reviewing one of the favorite watches in my collection. I have a pretty extensive collection at this point, all the way from watches I got for 50 cents and restored, all the way up to multi-$100 watches. I don't have any in the multi-$1,000 watches, at least not yet anyway. But I'm going to put this next to any of those multi-$1,000 watches that I've seen out there, and I'm also going to put it next to my Tissot Visodate, and that's the closest one I have in my collection for quality and price range. Now, I made another video, and it's entitled, "Is Bulova Still Relevant?" I'll put a tag to it up above here in a minute. And you can see that was the preface video. Actually, I had done the review on this watch right afterwards, and then of course when I went to go edit it, I realized that for whatever reason there was absolutely no sound in the video, and there was a wasted couple of hours. Anyway, so I'm doing it all over from scratch again, and I'm kind of glad that I did, because I'll show you in a little bit that I wasn't going to open the watch and show you this movement, a movement that I'd never seen before. And I wasn't going to open it because Bulova threw me a curveball and created some fasteners that I didn't have anything to open it with. So it was pretty frustrating for a while. And then I said, well, you know what? Let me just make a tool. And that's exactly what I did. So I did get the thing open, and you'll see that in a little while. Anyway, one of the reasons that this is one of the favorite watches in my collection is because it's just so darn elegant. It's a completely automatic movement. It has about a 40 something hour power reserve, although I couldn't find a document anywhere. I just went based on the movement, which is, by the way, it's a Swiss Sellita movement. I know if you go to the watch forums, you're going to find so much information or negative, positive opinion about this movement that it's kind of mind-boggling. What I will say is that it works very well in this watch. There's also a couple of very unique features in this watch, something that you would not normally see at this price point. If you see some of the lines and some of the in the case of this watch, you'll notice when it comes around again, there's some very distinct edges and cuts in this case, and I wondered how they did that. And I finally took the back off, and boom, it came to me, and I'll show you when the time comes. Anyway, let's get into this review in full bore. One of the first things, by the way, I didn't see this in person before I bought it. I just bought it, and one of the first things I noticed when I saw this watch was just how damned elegant it looked. I mean, this thing goes with anything. Some people might say it's very generic looking, and that might be true as well. But it has a beautiful sunburst silver dial. The classic indices, from something way back. And one of the things that struck me was the case it looked to me like it was made in two pieces, because there was no way they could machine that in there, and I couldn't figure it out at first. Let's see if we can get a close-up here. So you see the cut on that. This is not something that you could do with a buffing wheel, where you could go under the ledge and then stop. So it led me to believe that this was a two-piece case. Turns out I was wrong. But since we're looking at this close, it has the Bulova logo on it, the tuning fork, which is their logo for many, many years now, and this is based on their AccuSwiss line. So let's get into some very specifics. This is Bulova AccuSwiss automatic And as you see there very clearly, it says Swiss made. The entire watch was made in Switzerland. I'm not too sure about the band, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to give you the price on this later. It has a domed, anti-reflective sapphire crystal. Again, it has a beautiful sunburst silver dial. It has the date at 6 o'clock. And of course, it has minute, second, and hour hands. The crown is much better than anything I've seen in the price range. Now you see it's partially knurled, but whether it's knurled or not, all the way around, it's either highly polished, nickel or chrome plated, I'm not quite sure, but it looks fantastic. You'll see when I get it under the scope, a lot of these things look horrible when they're up close. You can see the machine pitting on them and whatever, but this one you don't see any of that. So let's go to the size. It is 40 millimeters wide, which is the perfect watch size for me. And it's only 11 millimeters thick in total. It has a genuine black leather band with a beautiful deployant clasp. And as you see there, it is made of all stainless steel. This particular one works very well. Has a very solid detent, and it is extremely comfortable. The only problem I have with it is this first band keeper is very close. So in order to get it in there, you really have to do that to get it in there. Eventually that's gonna it's gonna do exactly what this was designed to help. It's gonna cause the band to crack. And obviously the reason they use these deployant clasps is so that you don't see the cracking when you put it through a regular D-ring type of buckle. So, you know, good points and bad points on this. I think if they just move this up another, I don't know, quarter of an inch. The good thing is though, is that on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, look where I have this thing. So this would be easily 8 1/2 inch wrist, no problem. It's very long. So another positive for this one. The band seems to be very comfortable. It's very comfortable on the inside. You know, it has only 30 meters of water resistance. Not really what I would call waterproof by any stretch of the imagination. However, this is a dress watch. You know, if you're going to go in snorkeling or scuba diving with this, you know, not a good decision, right? It actually has they call it a bezel, but they call it a stationary bezel. So it's actually a separate component. The reason why I said there's not only 2 components is because there's actually more than that. I'll get into that in a minute. The movement, which you're going to see up close, maybe for the first time ever, is a Swiss-made Sellita SW200. Now, I've done some research on it because I didn't know much about it, but I can tell you that from what I understand, this is a clone of the ETA in almost every way. However, I will tell you that well, you'll see when I get on the inside, it actually looks a lot better. The entire thing is nickel plated. It has 26 jewels and Inca block shock protection. We're going to get into that when I open up the watch. As automatic, they call it an automatic watch, of course, with sweeping second hands. Now, as far as the sweeping second hands, take a close look. Look how smooth that is. That's because this beats at 28,800 beats per hour, which is considerably better than your standard ETA movement. According to what I read, the ETA 2824-2, this is supposedly a replica, and it was replicated because the ETA movement, the patent somehow, or over a period of time expired, and that's why this was copied. But I think they took that movement and they actually improved on it. From what I can tell you is, the feel of this movement, when you're adjusting the time, absolutely fluid. beautiful. I mean, there is resistance, and I like to feel that resistance, but there's no sand gritty feeling or anything like that. It's absolutely smooth. Changing the date when you're pulling it out. To set the date, it has a perfect detent. It comes out just very little, and the date spins very quickly. In fact, that first detent is very close to the watch case. Normally it's about halfway, but if you see when I set the time, it comes out considerably more. But you can find the detent very easily, and I love that in a watch. And again, sets very quickly. Also, I'm gonna spin this around, and we'll check the date here. You'll see what happens here in a second when I switch the date. Watch the 12 o'clock. Watch. Boom. Sorry about that little camera jolt. I got a big bug on my arm there a minute ago, and it's gonna scare the crap out of me. I didn't know what it was at first. But you saw the date change. It changes precisely at midnight. A lot of watches don't do that. They'll start changing somewhere around 10 o'clock. Seikos are famous for that. And they don't get all the way to the date and the day till they get to like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. But this one snaps in at exactly the right time. Now, because this is a highly polished bezel, I washed my hands as best I could, but I still seem to be getting fingerprints on there. So let's look again at that case. Look at the lines on the lugs. Again, I wear my watches, so they get scratched up and whatever, but I don't buy my watches to look at them. Of course, I like looking at them when they're on my wrist, but I don't really care to just sit there and stare at them in a box. If you look at the way they cut these from where they went from polished to brushed several times, and even different kind of brushing. So this is brushed heavily, this is highly polished, this is brushed a little bit more finely. And if you look at the way the lugs cut right off that case, there's no fluidness to where the lugs come off the case. It's absolutely abrupt angle. I've never seen that on a watch, and there's a reason for that. And here on the back of the watch, we have the Bulova engraved. It's deeply, well, let me see, is that engraved or is it applied? I think the Bulova is an Accuswiss is applied in some way. So is it where it says Swiss. There's the model number. And there where it says sapphire, glass, water resistant, and stainless steel. And I believe that here might be a serial number. I'm not quite sure. There's two numbers right next to each other. Now they call this, I found this on Amazon, but it's on a bunch of other sites too. I think this is a non-USA version. It's called the Murren model 63B176. Now it might be Murren or Murren, I'm not quite sure how you say it with the double R's, but it does have a double R there in the middle. And they're still selling this on Amazon, and I think this thing is an incredible deal. Go check this out and compare it, and the links to this watch will be below. So just click on them, you'll get right to Amazon. If you purchase one, it does help me out. I wind up with about $1 or $2 from their associate program. But in any case, it doesn't really matter to me. It's just something that helps me keep the channel going. Look at how they fastened the case and the back. This is kind of unusual, where the case comes all the way out and it's fastened with 6 machine screws. These are really tiny screws, and I'm going to try and bring it up close enough that you can see the pattern on those screws. Now, I don't have anything in the world that will get those things out. And I couldn't find anything. I went on Google and put Bulova watch screw back and every which way you could think of to try and find anything that would get those screws out. So ultimately, I wound up fashioning one of my own, And here it is. I'll show you it again when I go to take the case off. And basically what this thing does, I made sure it had no sharp edges, and it goes right in there, and you'll see it just, see it break the screw loose. Now, if you think this was easy, it wasn't, I can assure you. I had to get the cut just right, had to get the angles just right, had to get the size just right, because it actually has to go inside of the space where the screw is. It's recessed just a little bit, or countersunk, should I say. But it has a very industrial look to it, the way it was put together. And the seal on it is kind of second to none, because instead of, as in most watches, where you're screwing them down and you're actually twisting that seal, this is just a pressure fit where the seal is being pushed right against the watch. And I think this method is much better as far as sealing for water in some cases, especially on a dress watch. Now on a dive watch, obviously you want that sucker screwed down as much as you can. There is a seal on the crown, but nothing more than that. So this is not a screwed down crown, obviously. However, you can wind it and you can hack it. So it has everything that you need from an automatic watch and a little bit more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch batteries, and I'm going to hook this thing up to the scope, and we're going to get to the real fine details of this watch, and I'll show you why I like it so much. Okay, one more time before I get in the scope. I thought it was worth showing this, not from a super zoom, but from this angle. It's actually a very nice looking movement. I'm going to just show you some of the detail Bulova put in this. For instance, on the inside, they did this little etch pattern. Who would ever look in here, especially since they made it so hard to get in. You see that, and you see the Bulova signature. And then as we look at the movement itself, see how close we can get, still get some focus here. So, obviously Swiss made, rotors very nicely brushed. Gear mechanisms also fairly nice. And as I said before, this is basically a ETA clone, but it's a nice clone. I have ETA movement, the cousin to this, I would guess you would say. And it looks, this one actually looks nicer, I would say, the finish on it. Even the finish on the watch case underneath. It's very, it's machined really well. If you look, all the lugs are separate. They're actually separate pieces from the case. So this is machined extremely well, and I can tell you from my experience, I have never opened up a watch that is put together like this. I think it's incredibly cool what they did here. I'll take it out of this case holder here in a minute. So this explains how they got this very cool case shape with all these different angles. It's actually 3 parts to this watch case. There's your lugs, they're actually removable, and your case. So what do you think? You think Bulova has hit a home run with this? By the way, you can see how the gears, by moving the rotor, if I can get it clearly, you can see the little gears there, how it's winding the mainspring. Something you don't get to see too often as it ratchets back and forth. Okay, let's get some super zooms. Okay, so here we are under the scope. This is about a 15x magnification for your general reference. Here's your rough millimeters on the top and on the side. So each one of those represents about a millimeter. So that'll give you some clue as to what we're looking at here. It's not perfect, you know, obviously, because you're translating pixels into millimeters, but you get the idea, right? Okay, so anyway, we're looking at right now the rotor, and I'll say that this is one of the more nicely finished rotors. I think this thing could easily have a display case back. That's how nice I think this one is finished. There's your 26 jewels. And we were talking about what they call a Inca block shock protection. And what that is, the jewel, instead of being mounted directly to the case, is mounted or actually stopped from coming through the other side by this spring. That way, if you shock the watch up and down, instead of the balance wheel and spindle being pounded, it kind of absorbs some of the shock. Now, how hard you would have to hit it to get that spring to move, I don't know. I don't know what the spring tension is on that. But I would say it would be fairly hard. But anyway, that's what the whole Inca block thing is about. You can see the balance wheel flipping around in the background. Now, because I'm under such magnification, I have to adjust this constantly because of the different planes we're on. Here is your SW200 movement. It says -1. I couldn't find any information on that specifically. And here's the case. Case has a very industrial type of look. And by the way, I've worn this watch plenty of times. And unfortunately, this is what I see on every watch I pretty much work on. And that's this, that's all like skin and lotion and whatever. I left it on there, not to gross you out, but just to show you what a watch that's not worn often, how dirty it already got underneath there. This is where the seal would go. So that would stop any of that crud from getting in there. Not when it's apart like this though. And here's one of the coolest features of the watch, which we showed you before, how the lugs are bolted onto the case through the use of these two screws. I haven't seen anything like this on any other watch. Again, that's what gives it its distinctive design. Every time I look at this watch further, I have to tell you, I like it more. Even the crown, I know it doesn't look too great right now because it's dirty. I'm going to clean it up a bit. But it's finished much better than most crowns. Most crowns are very rough. This thing, they put some time into it. There's your other lug. And look how nicely this is brushed. There's no jagged edges. It's very smooth and soft around the edge here. There's no sharp edges on this watch. All the way down to the tip of the lug, which I'm going to have to adjust one more time here. You can see that it's been machined very, very well. So what else do we want to look at here? Not much to look at. Other than that, you see the gears move when I shake. Let's see if I can get that one more time. Okay, so there's the gears for the rotor. If I move the rotor, I'm going to rock it back and forth ever so slightly, and you'll see those charging up the spring. It charges in both directions. Pretty cool, huh? And let's put the rotor on the other side. Let's see what we got on the other side here. There's the drum for the, There's the drum for the spring and its appropriate gears. Screws are all polished, whether they're polished nickel or they're plated, I don't know. But again, more attention to detail on a watch that's never meant to have been looked at. That's what's crazy about this particular watch. It was never meant to have been looked at. Oh, you see that right there? That's a result of me opening the case. I got to get that out of there. Bad, 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 bad. Okay, so here we are looking at the dial at about 15x magnification. And by the way, I should point out right now that I have an LED light shining brightly on the watch face. If this wasn't a anti-reflective coated sapphire, all you would see right now is absolute pure glare. So it's only a very few watches I can get to show you this in such great detail and brilliant, vibrant colors and all that stuff, because most of the watches I do not have anti-reflective sapphire coated crystals. Anyway, as you can see, the Bulova, each individual letter is applied and the AccuSwiss is painted on. The indices are all, the major indices I should say, are all applied. I know that number might look two-dimensional, but it is not. Let me try and get this a little bit cleaner. You can see it's applied, and it's applied very well. The little minor indices are painted on, and they're painted on with little to no running. What I call running is when you can see like a bleeding from the paint on the edges, and there's little to none on this. The 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock position have numbers. However, the others have these indices here. Let me see if I can get a little more light on them. You can see the three-dimensional shadow right behind them here because I have the light coming at it from this angle. And there is actually lumen there. Now it also looks like the right side of these indices are a little bit longer, but it's not, I assure you. That's just shadow. And we'll play with the shadows here if I can. See the shadow move? And I can make that a little bit longer. By the way, while we're watching this, watch that second hand move around. I mean, it is extremely, extremely smooth. And if you look at the dial is very nicely textured all the way around. There's your 3 o'clock. Let me see if that's probably on the crystal. Yeah. The date window is applied. And this has a little bit of a, probably not the best finish on it. Let me see if I can get a better picture of that. Here we go. Now this is virtually impossible to see with the naked eye, but you can see that the inside edges of our little window here aren't exactly the best, but you can't see that with the naked eye. So this is a three-dimensional kind of a pyramid shaped window. The actual date is kind of a long numeral, longer than what I'm normally seeing. There's no, look at there's no distortion here, obviously. This is a normal 6. You can see how this is a little drawn out. Kind of a funky 4. Here comes the second hand again. Look how smooth that thing is. At this magnification, you'd see a 2100 movement, 2100 BPH movement bouncing in between those minor indices. You don't see that with this watch. And speaking of the hands, let's look at the hands. Let's get a closer look here. Put some more light on it. Now these hands all do have lume on them, as do the indices other than the 12, 3, 6, and 9. I'm going to flip this over before I open the case up because I want to show you a couple of things in real super duper close up here. Look at that screw. Have you ever seen anything like that? And I'll say it's not finished the best. Although I guess I may have scratched it, but I don't know how I could have. Let's look at another one here. Well, they all kind of look about the same. Sorry about the glare there. Now I know this looks like I totally trashed this watch, but again, at 20x magnification, I can polish this all out and made it look good, but I wear this watch a lot because I really, really enjoy it. There's some of the numbers. In fact, let's take a look at this. So after closer inspection, those are actually, the Bulova is actually etched in there. Boy, it's weird. I couldn't see that with my naked eye, but now you can see clearly see that they're recessed. Watch what happens when I put the light over it. You see how all of a sudden it looks two-dimensional? That's what I was seeing with my eye under the bright lights. When you get it at an angle with shadow, clearly it's etched in there all the way around. Okay, and here's a lume shot. Now the second hand doesn't have any lume on it, but you'll see it go past the minute hands here in a minute. There it goes. And in the major indices, you'll see the second hand go past. Once again, it goes past pretty smoothly. You know, it doesn't have a lot of lume, but the lume that it has is pretty good. Let's try that one more time. And it seems to last okay. I mean, for several hours at least. Okay, so before I give you my final take on this Bulova watch, if you haven't figured it out already, quick wristwatch check. This is my Timex Expedition. I did a review on this. I'll put it up here in a second. And this is one of the more comfortable watches you're ever likely to wear. It's a little bit large for me, about 43, 45 millimeters, but of course it has the Indiglo, which you can't see too good here. under this bright light. Okay, so the deploying clasp. Oh, by the way, remember when we looked at that earlier, how cool, now that we got this back open again, now you see how they did this, how they got these very sharp lines coming out of this removable lugs. Now I'm sure there are other watches that do this. I've never seen them before. I've never heard of them before. But you know what, while we got this out here, the one thing we didn't do, sorry about the noise there, we never measured the lug width on this, huh? So the lug width on this guy is 40, I think we have to call it 48, right? So very wearable, and because of how thin it is, it sits really nicely on the wrist. So if we can zoom out here a little, as much as I can. Now again, like any of these, when you get the second one on, now how are you supposed to get that in there without doing something like that? Or I've kind of managed to figure out that if I put this one in like this when I'm closing the second one, kind of flip it around like that, oop, and then it all goes back in without having to bend the leather. So you can do it, you just have to practice. You know, if you're a spaz like me, then it's a little bit more difficult. But let's look at how this thing sits on the wrist. Perfectly flat. No space under, because the watch case back is completely flat, and it's only a little over, it's not quite 12 millimeters thick. Again, beautiful crown, beautiful dial, beautiful hands, band's very nice, easily. So what's not to like about this? I mean, it's very, as round and as classic a design as it is, it has some industrial looking edges to it. It's 4-piece case, something I've never seen before. I don't know, guys, is Bulova back? Is Bulova relevant? Well, here's the thing. I don't think anybody knows this. And I don't work for Bulova. I don't know anybody at Bulova. I'm just a dumb watch collector who likes Timexes as well as automatic watches. But, you know, I think they did a great job here. And I think that if you bought this watch or anything that's made in this way with this movement, you would be extremely happy with it. I don't think I've given any watch that I've owned a review like this before. As far as I can't find anything wrong with it. Is there something wrong with it? I mean, other than people are going to say down below, oh, it's made by Bulova. And you don't know what you're talking about. Of course, I should have mentioned somewhere along the line here, it's all stainless steel, but of course it is. Again, the dial has curvature in it, and so does the domed crystal. Beautiful piece, guys. I think you'd be proud to own one. I think if Bulova actually let people know what they're doing these days and how nice they're making these watches, how nice they look, how nice they function, the movements in them, the craftsmanship that's going in them, I think that they might kick it back into gear, but who knows? Again, one more time, take a look at my Is Bulova Relevant? I'll have that in the show notes below. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. I had a guy the other day call me all kinds of names and called my mother names and everything else. I'm the stupidest guy in the whole world. You know, I let him go until he got really, really ridiculously gross, and I deleted one of the posts, but I let him call me whatever he wanted. If it makes him feel better about himself, whatever. Again, I'm not making any money doing this. I'm just doing it for you guys. So if you can keep the comments, you know, less than gross, I'd appreciate it. And don't forget to visit my website, watchtimela.com. Send me a note, send me an email, take a look at what I have on there. And I have an eBay store as well. And you can go to eBay/WatchTimeLA and see all of my fashion watches that I have for sale. Yes, guys, unfortunately, fashion watches that I have for sale. They help keep the channel going. If you have someone who you want to buy a watch for and you don't have $9,000 for a Rolex, I got all kinds of women's watches, men's watches, digital watches. Some as low as $9.99. So take a look, guys. I hope you're enjoying my videos, and if so, don't forget to subscribe. Very important for me that you subscribe. Hit my little Watch Time logo down there. I'm dying to get to 1,000 so I can get back into the YouTube promotion deal. So you could help me out greatly there. Anyway, until next time.